What does God's voice sound like? We're going to talk about that and other things in Wake Up to the Bible. I'm Daniel Kaplan. I'm here with my father, Dr. Kaplan. We're reading through the books of the law, Genesis through Deuteronomy over the course of this year. Today we're reading Exodus 19, 7 through 19. I'll be reading from the Robert Alter translation, and then we will discuss what we have read. And Moses came, and he called to the elders of the people, and he set before them all these words that the Lord had charged him. And all the people answered together and said, "Everything that the Lord has spoken we shall do." And Moses brought back the people's words to the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, "Look, I am about to come to you in the utmost cloud, so that the people may hear as I speak to you, and you as well they will trust for all times." And Moses told the people's words to the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and they shall wash their cloaks, and they shall ready themselves for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down before the eyes of all the people on Mount Sinai. And you shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, Watch yourselves not to go up on the mount or to touch its edge. Whoever touches the mountain is doomed to die. No hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or be shot. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the ram's horn blasts long, they it is who will go up the mountain." And Moses came down from the mountain to the people, and he consecrated the people, and they washed their cloaks. And he said to the people, "Ready yourselves for 3 days. Do not go near a woman." And it happened on the third day, as it turned morning, that there was thunder and lightning and a heavy cloud on the mountain, and the sounds of the ram's horn very strong. And all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought out the people towards God from the camp, and they stationed themselves at the bottom of the mountain. And Mount Sinai was all in smoke, because the Lord had come down on it in fire. And its smoke went up like the smoke from a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled greatly. And the sound of the ram's horn grew stronger and stronger. Moses would speak, and God would answer him with voice.
Uh,
Yes? Was there a problem?
yes, I would like you to go back to the end of verse 13. When the trumpet sounds long, they shall come near the mountain, because they weren't supposed to touch the mountain.
When the ram's horn blasts long, they it is who will go up the mountain. That's what it says.
But he just said that. But that's an interesting way to translate it. When it just said they can't touch the mountain. That's an interesting way to translate.
What does he have? Well, what do you have?
They shall come near the mountain.
Yeah, it is weird to say go up the mountain, considering that he said not go near the mountain. But I guess the idea, if you take that translation, is that at the ram's horn they can. It's until then that they cannot. I would guess.
Well, they never really go up the mountain. There's some that do.
Maybe that's the they who it is.
The leaders. Oh, okay.
Right, they who it is. It's not everybody. It says they it is who will go up the mountain.
All right. Let me just take a look at this.
Yeah, unfortunately, he does not have a note for that as to why that's the case. Oh wait, here it is. Um, no, I don't think that's.
I want to Exodus. I want to. So that's the 13th verse. I want to see if I can look at the Hebrew here.
It says. He says, some construe the Hebrew masculine pronoun bo as it, referring to Mount Sinai, because the previous verse has pronounced a ban on touching even the edge of the mountain. The clear syntactical connection of this clause, however, as Abram in Ezra sees, is with the two clauses that follow. The transgressor is to be killed from a distance by stoning or arrows, perhaps because by violating this taboo he has set himself irrevocably apart from the community.
No, that's what it says. They shall come up to the mountain.
Yeah, so No, this is what he's saying, Dad. Okay, now I understand. The they who it is that will go up the mountain is he shall be surely stoned or shot. The person who violates it by going up the mountain is the person who's stoned or shot, is what Alter is saying. No hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or be shot, whether beast or man, he shall not live. They it is who will go up the mountain. I just got rid of the when the ram horn blasts long. Does that make sense? The person who will be stoned or shot is the person that goes up the mountain.
Okay, I'll go with that.
Okay. You have near the mountain, but I don't know if
No,
that's
that's
true because
because
it says
no,
who touches the edge of it. So I think altar is actually a little bit better.
he does a better job than
Yeah.
these people didn't quite get the point that I think he got there.
Yeah. Well, again,
Yeah,
he got that from Ezra. Yeah.
Abraham
Abraham Ezra. Yeah.
Ibn Ezra.
Yeah. All right. So, what I was getting at with my question with the voice, right, is that this is a common thing that you hear.
By the way, though,
Oh,
let me just say,
yes.
if there's more than one way to translate something, then realize that and learn to live with it. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you have to learn to live with the fact there's more than one way to understand it. You know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to say that.
No. There's one trans. No, I'm just
Well,
kidding. No, it's so true. It is true because,
this is not a commandment like one of the 613.
well, it
This
was
was
a commandment for the time,
for
but it's not
them,
like you can't go to Mount Sinai now.
right? Yeah. So therefore, it's worth knowing the various options and then go on with your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
No, but people do obviously get bent out of shape. The KJV onlyists or the
Yeah.
whatever, the,
Yeah.
you know, any
Right.
onlyists,
Right.
Anyway, all right. So Sean pointed out a good point when they say everything that the Lord has spoken, we shall do, and he was like, "Yeah, right." I do think in this situation they did,
Right. Yeah.
but yes, obviously in general that is a common thing that people say, and it's never something that people can truly do. Unfortunately, although we hope to do. I don't want to say we hope to do better than most, but obviously, you hope to do as best you can. I'll say that.
They were in a positive frame of mind,
They were, yeah.
evidently. Later on, of course, they were pretty scared too later. So
Yeah. And this could have been divine intervention that they were in the positive mind to some extent. It could have been that, God kind of stirred up their spirit to be more resolved in a positive frame of mind, sort of thing.
this was so dramatic that you could understand why after this really traumatic experience, why they said later,
Right.
we'll do what you say.
Right. And this gets back to my question of what does God's voice sound like, right? It is very common within the evangelical community to talk about God's voice in a very loose sort of way. Like, God put it on my heart this, or God spoke to me this. When you think of God's voice in the Bible, it is something that often is truly terrifying. And it's not something that you have to listen for. It's something that is, again, it's kind of like I was talking about miracles. It is undeniably it. You do not have people. The closest thing I could think of to somebody misunderstanding God's voice is Samuel when he goes to see Eli and he thinks that Eli was calling for him. However, even in that situation, he obviously thought somebody was in another room talking to him, right? So the idea that God's voice, as written in the Bible, is this internal feeling thing that is something that you can have to really reach for and look for, and if you don't, you cannot hear it, and things like that. I do not find to be biblically accurate, and I find it to be very damaging. I do not see it. I do not see the biblical soundness for that. What do you think?
Well, there is a small voice that Elijah hears. You know,
The still small voice.
right? Yeah. So
Yes, but do you think of that as something that he could be like, well, I'm not really sure if that's God or not. Maybe that's just my internal thinking.
no.
Right. And so what the answer you'll get back from evangelicals is like, well, I know it wasn't my internal thinking, and it's not exactly correct. And I don't want to sound too mean-spirited towards people that feel like they've had a true encounter or whatever they want to call it. I want to be careful
Oh
about
yeah,
that, but I think they should be careful with how they share that with others because there is the possibility
definitely.
that you are fooling yourself. And if you are fooling yourself, you could be blaspheming because if you put the words into God's mouth that he did not in fact say, that is a very serious
Very
issue and
serious.
people do not take it seriously enough.
I agree with that, and I wanted to mention that it is somewhat startling, at least to me, to think about how serious that situation was there at Sinai. That if they touch the mountain, they're executed for it.
Yep.
But it does show this was a very major event in human history, and the seriousness of 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 of, uh, God's standards is brought out. And a couple of verses in Hebrews 10:31, it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. And then in Hebrews 12 and verse 29, for our God is a consuming fire. So ultimately, he takes his law very seriously because he wants us to share eternity with him. And if we sin, we're self-destructing.
Right.
We're hurting ourselves uh, in his plan for us,
Right.
which is for our good.
Right.
And so he takes it very seriously. And he's not going to go through all of this and later on say, psych, I didn't really mean it. It's ridiculous. If you look at the Mount Sinai situation and all that took place when he gave that law, it's ridiculous
Right.
to think that later on he's going to scrap it for something else.
Right.
You know?
It's just not that good. It was
Yeah,
okay. It was a thing for the time.
yeah,
Yeah. It's a little. It's very disrespectful at
yeah.
best. Um, it is. It is very. It's and here again, and you have the connection, right? Because the third day, right? You have the connection. He's giving you the continuity here. Because when you think of the third day, what do you think of? You think of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, or at least you might. And here we have and there's a parallel with talking about the third day and the giving of the commandments. And then as soon as he comes back, what does he say? He says, spread the gospel and then teach them all the things that I've commanded you, right? So there's a continuity here that does not need to be broken. It does not benefit mankind to break these moral principles.
If you're aware of
At the very least, just in terms of our day to day, it doesn't benefit us.
if you're aware of the Ten Commandments, you'll see them in Genesis.
Yes.
In Genesis,
Right.
Gentile rulers don't want to commit adultery.
Right.
The Sabbath is mentioned in Genesis. Murder
Well, they'll say that the Sabbath is not mentioned as a practice; it's only mentioned as a principle.
but it's there. That's all I'm saying.
I'm just saying, though, that's the
Well,
argument.
all right. They want to argue, but I'm just saying it's there.
Okay,
And
I'm just giving it to you. I
not
don't agree with it. I'm just giving it
and
to you.
not murdering is there,
Right.
and so on.
Honoring your
Honoring your
parents.
parents is there. So
Yes.
really,
Stealing.
the Ten Commandments are there in Genesis.
Right.
They're a standard of morality that
The problem is it the Ten Commandments in Genesis or it's the Nine Commandments in Genesis? Because that's the argument. The argument is, and again, this goes back to what I was saying yesterday. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, right? Or forever.
how could they say
Why
that?
would the representation of the personal interaction between God and people switch from saying that the Sabbath is a moral principle to the Sabbath is not a moral principle?
How could he have sanctified it and not to just be a principle? It says he sanctified it there. Because he rested on that day.
Right.
How could they say that's just a principle?
They do.
Oh, good,
Because they
good luck.
well, no, because they say
Ridiculous.
it would be mentioned. Why doesn't it say that Abraham kept the Sabbath, or why isn't the Sabbath ever
It
mentioned?
implies that he did. He kept. Look what it says about Abraham in 26:5.
Right.
It
It
doesn't.
also implies that the Sabbath is for everybody when Jesus said it was made for men, not made for the Jews. But I
You
understand
know, it was
because he
interesting.
does.
Just last night, I was watching a biography of Charles Wesley,
Uh-huh.
and that
The guy who did Wesley.
well, the guy he wrote so many hymns, unbelievable.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but anyway,
I think that's John Wesley.
well, no, he had a brother John. There were two
John Wesley was the one that created the Wesleyan
Well,
doctrine, right?
two of them came to Georgia, and then they came back to England.
Okay.
But
Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm digressing.
but anyway, they talked about the Sabbath a lot and being careful about the Sabbath.
Of
Of
course.
course, they felt they believed it had changed to
Right.
Sunday.
Oh
But
yeah, I mean, if you go to the 1689 Baptist statement, the Sabbath is a perpetual moral commandment from creation. That is what they believe.
and
Their descendants have rejected it, and they would call them heretics.
yeah, all right, just okay,
It's a very big shame, right?
right.
Right. But I would say my argument to that is because they did not establish the Sabbath on a rock. They established it on sand because you cannot really defend Sunday very well, biblically speaking. And so when the SDAs came around, in the mid to late 1800s when the Sabbath became a question, which is not that long after the Bible was mass distributed. By the way, as soon as you get the Bible, in mass hands, the Sabbath becomes a question, right? In terms of when it is. The Catholic Church had established the Sunday Sabbath, or yeah, that's a little reductive, but you know what I mean. But as soon as the Bible becomes public, it becomes a question almost immediately. And then by the mid 1800s, you have people basically creating very good arguments that there's not a good scriptural reason for it to be on Sunday. And then the answer to that is just a dissolving of the Sabbath concept altogether, which is more or less where we're at. Although there are some people that are pushing back on that and trying to restore more of a lawful approach to Christianity. But I do wonder, now that all these arguments are out there, what's going to eventually happen to that movement. And I do hope that that movement eventually integrates to something more similar to our belief system. And I think it very well could happen.
Well, I suppose that generally might be happening is this concept of 1 day out of 7. That's what a lot of them would say. 1 day out of 7, not necessarily what we would call the seventh day, but 1 day out of 7.
Right, but then you still have to ask the question, considering some people are,
right.
if you want to say that they're bent out of shape or whatever unfairly, that it should be the seventh day and not the first day, right? Why wouldn't you just, for compromise sake, if it doesn't matter, go with that? And I think there's a reason, and I think it's because they have an issue.
No, Sunday has become, more or less the day of rest in the Western world. So,
But if your point is it's just a day out of 7 and it doesn't matter,
right,
then why not just do the seventh day to be consistent with other people that are concerned with the issue?
well, because the vast majority of people have been resting Sundays for so long.
But that tradition is not a good reason. Not really. If it doesn't matter.
Well, it'd be an adjustment to the whole economy if we shifted to.
Not really, because we have the weekends off in America.
Yeah, but not every place is America.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But I mean, fair enough. But I think a lot of countries take weekends off. So I don't know. I think, industrialized countries mostly do, but I could be wrong. Anyway, let's talk about some other stuff. Let's get back to scripture here. So we have some interesting requests, right? Because here we have the purification of the people. So we have a washing. Well, that kind of makes sense, kind of a baptism sort of thing, washing the cloaks. But the other thing is, they say it specifically says, do not go near a woman, which seems to imply sexual contact, I guess.
Yeah, the idea is that you don't want to, let's put it this way, sometimes sacrificial rituals and religious rituals become orgies.
Right. Well, it will in a little bit.
Yeah, and so the idea is let's just focus on the spiritual side,
right,
and let's not mix sex with it.
Right. And we do have a commandment to have at least 1 day of fasting a year, and that's and I guess what I'm getting at is the issue I see sometimes is some people will take this and they'll extract it out and they'll start to get a little bit, I don't know, Catholic with it or something, and start to think that this is somehow saying something demeaning about sexuality in general, which it's not, just like you fast sometimes. However, one thing I would extract from this principle is in Paul's writing, he talks about not denying your spouse except for a period of time he says a short while. Well, this is not a bad principle, 3 days perhaps, to think about as perhaps a reasonable amount of time. If this is the amount of time that God asked them back then, right? So I guess you should ask yourself, if you want to abstain for longer than 3 days, why it is you think you need more time than God said these people needed at that time. That's just something to think about. I'm not going to make a law about it. I'm just saying there's a scriptural principle there.
Well, you have frankly the time when your wife is menstruating. That's already a period of time,
right?
Not having sex, so
right. But Paul says don't, because Paul wasn't talking about that. He was saying don't deny each other except for prayer and fasting, and he says a short while or something to that effect. So I think 3 days. Think about it as potentially as a fair request.
Now Daniel has defined a short while. I'm kidding. Yeah.
I'm just showing.
No.
I'm showing the example.
Doing a great job, Daniel.
If you, whatever.
No,
Like,
good, good.
I'm just saying,
Right, yeah.
Yeah, the biblical definition of a short while is obviously up for question. I'm not saying otherwise. All right. So, so we have the sound of the ram's horn, which is, of course, something that you could connect with the Festival of Trumpets, which is going to come later. This is Pentecost, but I do think there's almost like a little bit of foreshadowing for the next holiday every time there's a holiday, which is kind of fun. It creates a nice continuity throughout, right?
And also, this is a theophany pointing to the second coming of Christ in some ways. In other words, if you look at Habakkuk, the third chapter, the God coming on to Mount Sinai was a foreshadowing of the Messiah, of the coming of Christ, the blowing of the trumpets, and the second coming.
Yeah.
Um,
Sean is saying Jesus said he wouldn't be with the disciples for a short while, and that was 3 days.
Okay.
See, all right, maybe it is.
All right.
Paul's saying, do
All right.
not abstain for more than
Right.
3 days. Nah,
All
I don't. But yeah, no, I mean, you
right.
could.
All right.
You can at least make the case. So
Oh
something to
yeah,
keep in
sure,
mind.
sure,
Something to keep in mind.
sure.
And it said, and the other thing again is it says, the people trembled and they were scared and there was fire and there was smoke. And to my dad's point, it's a pretty impressive. Like, can you imagine? Like, imagine a company, does this big pomp and circumstance, and I mean, this does actually happen sometimes. But you do this big pomp and circumstance and everything to establish this new company policy, and then like 20 years later, they're like, yeah, that was terrible. Let's just throw that out. It looks really bad. It looks like you don't know what you're doing, right? You would expect that from humans. You would not expect that from a perfect entity. You would not expect that.
And you see Moses here as a type of Christ. He's the
Right.
intercessor between the people and God here.
Right. And of
Yeah.
course, you have the Transfiguration, which is a similarly kind of, spectacle. And there's a vision of Moses as part of
Right,
that
yeah,
too,
right.
for sure. All right. So anything else before we move on forward with this
Move
pomp
on.
and circumstance?
Move on.
Let's move forward with God the Great. Uh, uh, I don't know. I don't want to say pageant but it's just like the spectacle of it, right?
Right.
That sounds kind of flippant, but there's something really beautiful about that and awesome about that in a way that I think sometimes people underplay. The
Right.
fact that the God does do things with flair, as it were, he does
Right.
things with bombast. He could be very stoic about it and just be very calculated and simple. And nope, that's not how it is. So something to keep in mind.
By the way, there's a interesting uh, Jewish comment on if the law was so important, why did it come from Mount Sinai? Why didn't it come from a higher mountain?
Ooh.
So the idea is, well, this shows the principle of humility. So then, well, if you want to be humble, why not give it in a valley? Because you should be humble, but not be a doormat.
That makes
That's
sense.
okay. Just want to mention
Well,
that.
also, if you want to talk about Mount Sinai is not in the land.
Yeah, well, it's more or
Why
less
isn't that
in the
interesting? If
wilderness.
this right, if
It's
this is something that's just supposed to be for the people of the kingdom of Israel, why wasn't it given in Israel?
Yeah, right. That's a good point too. Before they ever get there,
Yeah,
right, right.
right. Okay,
There's another
it's
thing.
before they establish a country.
Another thing too is that the word, Har Sinai, it's similar to a Hebrew word, spelled differently, but it's similar to the word for hatred. And so the Jews say that Israel, by receiving God's law, also received the hatred of the rest of humanity. And that is really the basis for anti Semitism. Because whatever you think of Jews, when people think of Jews, they think of God's law. And getting at the Jews is their way of telling God they don't want him butting into their business. The bottom line of anti Semitism is anti God, actually.
Right. It's not wanting to accept the authority of God
Right,
to
yeah,
make
right.
decisions that you don't
And
understand.
you could read Hitler's writings, and it's very clear in his writings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, please like, subscribe, hit the bell, and we will see you tomorrow.